Perfect. So, Caroline, great having you here from LemVega Capital out in Puerto Rico for podcast episode number two, actually, the Executive Edge here. We have a killer out in Puerto Rico building a wealth management firm from the ground up. And Caroline, it's just time to learn a little bit about you, what keeps you going every day, what got you here, and what you see in the future. So, kind of intro everybody to yourself. Who are you? Where'd you come from? How'd you get out to Puerto Rico? Build that foundation for us.
Yes. Thank you, Christian, for having me on your podcast. I'm definitely excited to share my story and also, tell you more about my background, experience, my vision for LemVega Capital and how we got started and where we're at now and what that experience has been like, which has been truly amazing. And being a founder and a CEO is something that I always aspired to be, but what we've built so far is really outstanding. Even seeing the growth for the past 4 years since we started in 2021, it's been really, really amazing and excellent the entire time. So I can just dive into my background and like I said, we started the firm back in 2021. So around that time, I was also getting my PhD and I was working in the corporate world for a really large biotech firm called Genmab. And Genmab is doing really well right now as well. Not only are they publicly traded with a $50 billion market cap, but they also have been acquiring other small biotech companies, one for $1 billion cash a few months ago, and then just recently they acquired another for 8 billion in cash. So they're definitely growing as well, which is exciting to see. So at that time, like I said, was in school still, doing my PhD, was in the corporate world, and I also began the firm. And at that time, I was just a solo investor with my own personal capital, and I started building a track record in public equities. And I was, posting a lot of my investments online, and got a large Twitter following at that time in 2021, which was a really popular market, and it was a bull market, and everyone, post COVID was in their house and out online and trading, investing. So I had a few viral posts then, and some of the comments they were saying you should start your own fund, your own long short hedge fund. So, I got that idea after having some pretty good investments in that year, which I deployed around $7 million between 2020, 2021, 2022. So that time frame right before we launched our first fund. And going back a little bit farther into my story, I also received my MBA when I was really young. I started my MBA at 19 years old, and I had also graduated with my bachelor's degree at 19 after starting college at 16 years old. And for some people, that's like unbelievable, like what a story. And it is. It's really rare to speed through academics that young, and I had an opportunity to do that, being in private boarding school. So I took advantage of the opportunity to speed up my education. And I'm really glad that I did. It's a very ambitious path, and I shared in some of the articles about me that I had no social life. There was no partying. I was completely sober the whole time I was in college. It was like really boring. Also working and in classes in the summers and winters. So, it was like no life. All I was doing was school and trying to get out of there as soon as possible. But so my education, and academics, a lot of people started saying, like, am I a genius? How did I do that? And I don't like consider myself like a prodigy or a genius in any way. The fact that I graduated college as a teenager, but I think it was just my mindset, putting in a lot of hours, deep work, also sacrificing a lot of fun things at the time. And that kind of just that mindset pushed me into my professional career, right?
Sure.
Because to do something exceptional, like let's say top 1% or even top 5%, you have to be different than 99% of people, think different, act different. You know, and that helped me a lot to build what I've built now. So it started around 10 years ago. And I was at 16 when I started college. Now I'm 26, and every year I kind of just compounded my growth, experience, skill set as much as possible to build what we have built now. And then forwarding back on the timeline back to 2021, that's when we launched our first hedge fund. And that's what we started the firm managing hedge funds. And then we had other partners contact us. We launched fund number two, then we launched a VC fund, then private equity, real estate, and we've launched multiple private funds at this time, all from Puerto Rico. And a lot of people don't know that Puerto Rico has the same exact corporate laws as Delaware. So
Mhm.
it's comparable. And a lot of funds are registered in Delaware, but Delaware doesn't have the same benefit of, the Puerto Rico corporate tax incentive. So we kind of spearhead that in Puerto Rico as the leading firm right now.
Got it. Okay. And then as far as the tax structure for Puerto Rico, the only difference is you actually have to live there for 6 months and a day out of the year in order to capture that, correct? You can't just register.
So I'm not gonna I'm not gonna answer that question 100% just because I don't want to say anything, right?
Cool.
That anyone can say, oh, she's giving me tax advice or investment advice. But there are ways to still take advantage of the tax incentives without being a resident. So on the corporate side, it's different, different sorts of tax laws, and there are many sorts of tax products here that you could still get, lower capital gains tax rate. So that's all I'm going to say about that without, saying anything that can be misunderstood.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay. So, I mean, that was definitely a strategic move going to Puerto Rico for that purpose. And it seems like everything got started again when people were able to see the track record you made for yourself first, right? Which is that proof of concept, right? And that's really awesome. And that's goes to like the transparency in that in this industry that's coming with technology and everyone getting access to similar information. Would you say that kind of has some bearing on it?
Yeah, I think that definitely helped. The fact that I had a following, the fact that I had, external parties saying, hey, you should do this, you should launch a fund. I got connected to many fund managers early on. And I think it also helped me as a woman to be more mentally prepared because even with emerging fund managers, it's very difficult to launch a fund, to manage a fund. I think the statistic is around 95% of new funds fail just
Mhm.
because it's extremely expensive, the legal, the compliance, the capital raising is just as tough as any startup, if not more difficult. And I think it just helped me mentally prepare and say, even though I'm younger in my career or, in a male dominated industry or like the many other things, I had a good foundation with that too. And, at the time I was connected to a lot of other traders and like I said, investors that kind of pushed and motivated me. And it was less about my age or my gender. And it's really just about like, what are the results? What's the track record? What's the return? And I mean, like, people could care less about the profile.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess can you explain how you differentiate yourself, right, from all the other funds out there, all the other firms out there? You have the multi-fund GP platform, right? So how does that kind of differentiate from the traditional firms, or what specific value does that bring to clients that invest with you guys?
Yes, what we're operating right now with LemVega Capital is extremely unique and innovative. I can say that there's no other firm in the entire world that has the infrastructure that we have. just because it's specific to the jurisdiction and specific to the tax laws here, and there's no other structure that's operating at the level that we're on the island. And again, this is a structure that's considered part of the United States, part of the US federal oversight, part of the US financial authority. So Puerto Rico is a commonwealth, it's a territory. So we have our own unique structure, and that all of our entities are registered here. And with the multiple funds that we manage, these are all different asset classes, all managed by an institutionally trained manager, not myself. I'm kind of like the face of the company, the CEO, the visionary, the founder, but we have separate managing partners. Each fund is managed separately, but it's all under an umbrella GP. So we currently have the SEC classification as an ERA. And as we expand to an IRA or RIA, when we have over certain assets under management, it will be the same umbrella platform. And a lot of these new funds that we launch also have a 3 to 5 year track record, which helps a lot, and positive returns that are, above the standard, S&P index fund. So we look for that as well. And right now, we're expanding our assets under management by launching new funds, bringing in more GPs and LPs. But this sort of infrastructure that we've built is very, very new. And we don't post and publicize all of our business models or our strategies just because of the SEC marketing rules, and we want to be very conservative. But this is something that is still, a baby company. We're only 4 years old, and as we grow over the next 3, 5, 10 years, things will rapidly expand as well.
Sure. That's awesome. I have a couple questions based on that. So the first one is, again, I know you guys are in Puerto Rico for those tax laws. So I guess how does that affect the regular investor, right? So if I, for example, I'm on the mainland, right? I have a liquidity event. I want to invest with you guys. I don't live in Puerto Rico. Can I still benefit from the tax haven that you guys have created out there?
Yes, there are ways for LPs to also benefit from the funds being located here. And in our case, our management company holds the decree. So again, this is a different type of structure. There are some other funds here that do a LLC or a series LLC structure, but we have like 20 different legal entities. We have one management company LLC, and then we launch GP LLCs, and then also the LP fund. So those are the limited partnership legal entity. And I'm not going to say too many details just because I don't want to be misunderstood about this. And, I'm not a tax attorney or a lawyer or any like tax advice on this, but there are ways for our LPs to get benefits from this sort of structure compared to, funds that are registered in Delaware.
Awesome. Okay. And then also, I don't want to say any details unless you want to, but you mentioned having a pretty meaty goal over the next 3 to 6 months for your AUM. You know, can you speak on that? And if so, like what's the strategic lever that you're pulling to achieve that growth in that time period? Like what's the vision for that? That's pretty cool, for me, for you to kind of to tell the viewers just to see how somebody is able to do something that extraordinary.
Yeah. And it does seem like a very large goal to have a 10-figure AUM goal. And honestly, looking back to when I started, that was not my original vision. It was probably to hit, the 20, 30, $50 million mark. And because of the unique structure that we have, we were able to expand our AUM really quickly to the 9-figure amount. And then when we passed that at the end of 2023. So that's over 2 years ago. And then now to hit the 9-figure AUM mark, or sorry, 10-figure AUM mark that we have with our $1 billion AUM goal, that's because we're expanding internationally. So for us, we're not just a US based firm or just a Puerto Rico based firm. We're also in the UAE right now, expanding there with new partners that have signed on. We're going to be expanding into Asia to probably Hong Kong or Singapore. And that's helped us because when you could target international LPs and they want to have a US presence or a US focus or have a US feeder fund or target US LPs, they come to us for that structuring and they come to us for a co-GP partnership or to be LPs in our current offerings. So that's been super helpful in growing the assets under management that we have. And another factor in that is the fact that we're not only right now an investment management company, but we're expanding to a global financial institution. So it's going to integrate banking. Also, we're going to have our own custody, deposits. We're going to have our own lending, debit, credit cards in the future. And it's going to be a banking platform for our own investors, our own GPs, our own LPs that are associated and affiliated with LemVega, meaning our internal partners. And then once we have that initially launched, we're going to open it up to external third parties as well. So this is going to be able to operate in 180 countries. So many people, when they launch their fund, they're just thinking, okay, this is US. We're only going to focus on US investors or US founders. But for us, we're thinking really from an international perspective, like all of the Middle East, all of Europe, all of Asia, all of the Americas right now.
Got it. Okay. And with that said, I mean, what's the idea behind getting yourself visible to all of that clientele, right? What's the push behind it? How are you getting in front of those people? How are you making sure they know, like, and trust you? They continue to see you every single day, every single week. Is there marketing efforts? Are you traveling? What's the idea behind that?
Yes, the visibility is extremely important for funds. And there's a very fine line of how funds can market, just because depending on if it's a 506B or 506C offering, there's different rules and regulations around that. But I think having a brand overall is super important to know that the firm exists, that you really have a team, that you have an office, that you have, hosted events previously, that you have really good lawyers, that you can explain what the firm does, at least at a high level publicly, is important. And for LemVega, I made sure that we had an established brand and established visibility before we even thought about, hosting anything about our fund offerings. Just because if it's a very new firm starting from scratch that just focuses on their offerings, yes, they may be able to raise capital, but they're not going to paint like a big picture of a financial institution. All the largest firms and banks even have some sort of brand visibility, or they have physical locations that people can go to, their customers can go to. It's very different than just operating like an online firm. So we've tried to do that from the beginning. Also, it's important to get like public relations, press as much as possible, and have that thought leadership. And that's been our focus as well. So I would say that's all important. And for us, I think we really did pull off a great marketing campaign so far since 2021, because all across Google, we're listed as the leading investment firm in Puerto Rico right now. And we have NASDAQ articles, Yahoo Finance, Economic Insider, World Financial Review. I mean, we've been posted everywhere. So that's been good. Also a few viral LinkedIn posts, which help. I know people are always trying to go viral on LinkedIn, but when you really do go viral on any of these social platforms, it could be huge visibility. So, we've had that across multiple platforms. Like I said earlier in the podcast, I went viral on Twitter, I've gone viral on TikTok, Reddit, even LinkedIn. So the more people know about you, the more eyeballs that you have, I would say that's really like a golden ticket.
Sure, sure. And that I guess comes with the transparency that we've been talking about, right? Because everyone sees you, they see what you're doing on an
Mhm.
ongoing basis. It's not like you're just coming out when you want to be seen, right?
Yes.
So let me ask you, with that said, what do you feel is like a big or one of the biggest misconceptions about the industry that you found completely wrong being on the inside of things?
Yes, I think that the main thing that is an issue in this industry is transparency. Just because when you're operating something that's so big, or you make it and you're established, there's still a lack of transparency with potential clients or customers where the data might not be readily available, and data that helps people make decisions on where they want to place their assets. So I would say, that could be an issue. And there's a, conception about being too big to fail. So people just assume, these large institutions have all the boxes checked, and sometimes they don't. And because they're so large or have so many assets under management, nobody really looks into it. And I would say that the firms of the future, the banks, the investment management companies that are the most transparent and they have the most data that's publicly available, they're the ones that are going to come out on top. And I would say also something that's changing, I think, between the older generations and my generation being a Gen Z, is that we appreciate knowing who is the real leadership that are running these organizations. Like, not only like having a face of the company, but like knowing like who is the CEO? What are their morals? How do they operate? How do they think? Like what's going on the inside internally, that we can look at. And I think in my generation, being a Gen Z like brands that where they know what the brand stands for, where they know what's happening. And in the financial industry, that's lacking right now. Like nobody really knows who's running the show with these firms, and I think that's going to change in the future. And
Sure.
in terms of like trust, honesty, credibility, and making people aware of, okay, like I know the leadership, so I trust this organization and I'm going to put my assets with them. Right now, that's lacking.
Yeah, I mean, it's as simple as just the fact that, most of our parents and their parents, they all invested in like 401ks. And 90% of the people that are getting ready for retirement, you ask them, well, what are your funds doing? How is it performing? I don't know, right? But our
Yeah.
generation, I'm a millennial, you're Gen Z. We're like, well, how is it performing? What's it doing? Why is it doing that? What are the options? What's available, right? The transparency.
Yeah.
It just wasn't a thing back before the internet, right? Um,
Yes.
so let me ask you again, with the new generations and things moving forward at such a rapid speed, how are you adopting like technologies, AI, things of that nature within your workflows to make everything more synced and more efficient?
Yes, and I think the firms, they need to adapt regardless because speed is everything. And if you're falling behind and not adapting, there's going to be somebody out competing your firm. I mean, this industry is so competitive and cutthroat that the ones that do have an edge and do adapt and do move quickly, they're going to win the business, And it's all who has the most assets under management, who has the most revenue, who has the best marketing, and the ones that are able to use AI, use better softwares, be more organized, be more efficient, be more correct with whatever they're trying to achieve, and do it faster and cheaper. I think they're going to have an advantage. And that's also a difference with this industry because a lot of it's very conservative and traditional, and people resist changing, but they have to right now because even like the AI that's out there, even integrating like a few AI things can really make a difference. And a lot of people don't know about what technologies are actually good, and a lot of time can be wasted, I think.
Sure, sure. So I guess at this point, if you had a magic wand to fix one bottleneck in your flows in your growth, what would that be? Would that be, a process, a workflow, a system? Is there anything right now that's kind of slowing down your process that you'd like to find that solution to?
I don't think my firm has any specific bottlenecks right now. I think we're good at identifying those and quickly making it, fixing it, making it better. But I would say something specifically as a woman in a male dominated industry, I get a lot of a different reaction, I think, than most founders and CEOs. And I know, some women would agree with me on this, and I don't use this as an excuse of, anything. But it just is the way culture and society is when you see a woman making it in a male dominated space, there could be like extra critique, extra scrutiny, the haters, trolls come out of the woodwork to, say something, and it pisses a lot of people off. So, if we could change that for the whole industry, that would be better because I know a lot of very, very successful young women that are billionaires. I mean, there's a new billionaire, 29 years old, that just I think raised like some ginormous amount, and their firm, I think it's called Kashi or Kalshi or something, and it's in financial services. I think their firm was valued at 11 billion, and one
Wow.
of the founders just became a billionaire. I think maybe a few days ago. So then it's like, okay, well, if a few stories like that pop up, and you see, okay, yeah, there are women seriously getting wealth, like real wealth, real exits, real rounds, that are in their 20s. I think it's going to change, the perception of that. And I've told people before, like, my goal is to be a billionaire, and like I get made fun of, but it's like, hey, that can really happen, despite the time that it might take. If my firm hits a certain AUM and I have a certain amount of ownership, that will, eventually hit. So it's really just a numbers game.
Yeah, at a certain point, it's just literally math, right? You just have to do the
Yes.
numbers, right?
Yes.
And that's the cool thing about the industry, right? When you get to a certain point, or even regardless of where you are, it is just simple
Mhm.
math, right? You say, okay, what's the growth rate? What's the average? What's the risk, right? How do I avoid as much risk as possible? And how do I hit that average? And then what are my growth, right? What are my growth levers and how can I pull those? So that's the really fun thing. It's simply a game, and it's
Yes.
realize that. Awesome. So when it comes to, getting into those other countries and those other markets again, what's the next branding leap to do that, right? Because, obviously in order to grow, if you haven't done it before, you have to do something different. So what's the
Mhm.
next step or next challenge into, okay, this is how I plan to get seen in all of these different areas throughout the world?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think there are certain smart strategies to expand internationally, but it comes down to connections, also invisibility, right? Like if you don't speak the language of that country, get a business partner that's a local, find someone extremely high level to partner up with that believes in the mission and the vision. And we actually were able to sign on business partners in Abu Dhabi who are Emirati. So, for example, you want to partner with a local person. Myself as an American going to these different countries, and being from a multicultural background myself, I'm half Persian, half German. I can kind of fit in. but at the same time, I don't know the business practices there. I don't know how people connect, and each culture is very different. For example, if we're using the Middle East, um, the business there is done differently than the business in the United States. It just is. It's a completely different step-by-step process if you want to sign on an investor in the Middle East or an investor in the US. And I would say, regardless of all the online promotion and marketing that a firm can do, being in person and doing these face-to-face meetings is super important. So that way they know, like, who is this person? You know, do we have a personal relationship before the business relationship? That helps as well, because going straight for like the business transaction right off the bat, that can turn away a lot of potential investments. So like having some sort of personal relationship before the business is executed helps a lot too. But sometimes, you know, the opportunity is so urgent that it's just like business first. And I feel like that's how it's done a lot in the United States and California and New York, because these things are time sensitive. But I would say if you have the relationships, the reputation, you understand the culture, then any sort of country you can really get into at any time.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean it's really cool how you said partnering with somebody in that region, right? Because it's ultimately a matter of people have different viewpoints on this. I have a certain one, and I think you have the same one. Collaboration over competition, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we can all grow if we grow together rather than trying to beat the next person out, right? There's certain times when there is competition, but for the most part, if you can find that collaborative viewpoint and mindset, that's really the way that we all grow together.
Yes, and I would say that that's rare to find. If you find a group that you can collaborate with, or real people that want to collaborate in this industry, that stick with them, you know, do
Yeah.
anything for them, you know, be extra generous with business partners that are like that, because a lot of the time it's very cutthroat and competitive, like I said, and everyone's just out for themselves, their cut, their distribution. And if you can find people that are locked in for many years and, you know, by your side, understanding the vision, it's like I would do anything for those sorts of people, that you can really trust, and that they're with you during the ups and downs of you know, managing a company.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and at the end of the day, right, if you collaborate with enough people, nobody can compete with you. So it's kind of the same way of thinking of it, but different ways of getting there.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, awesome. So, just closing out, looking ahead for the next 12 to 18 months, what's the single most exciting or the biggest development or shift that you anticipate both in the financial space, right?
Mhm.
And kind of how you guys are positioning yourself to prepare for it, and then also the single biggest shift in your company specifically.
Yes, that's a great question. And a lot of the times I think very far into the future, like some of the planning we do now is for like 5 to 10 years from now. And it's interesting to see how different the world might be in 10 years or in 20 years, you know. And that's also why I'm grateful for starting a company like this in my 20s, because just you think of the length of time, right? Like in one person's career.
Especially now. We'll all be
Yeah,
robots in 10
it's like
years.
there is no tomorrow. Start now. Like you're already
Yeah.
behind. But the 12 to 18 months from now, I would say we have really three main goals. So the first is, you know, increasing our assets under management, because that's the single KPI that can determine, you know, our company's success as an investment management firm. That's the one factor that's correlated to our revenue, our growth, our valuation. So trying to get our assets under management as high as possible. And we do this two ways. One, bringing in LPs, which are the investors that write a check and they're passive. And then second is the GPs that are the fund managers that, integrate their fund and their assets to our firm, our umbrella, our platform. So that's the first, increasing our AUM, our AUM. And then second is, like I said, we have Emirati partners that we close. So we're actually launching a few new vehicles and offerings with them, which are going to be very different. And it gives a lot of US LPs exposure to, the Middle East markets and the UAE, Saudi, all those regions. So there's a few vehicles and offerings that we're launching with them, which that will already increase our AUM. So those two are kind of hand in hand. And then the third is we're going to be launching a private banking segment, which is going to be obviously separate from the investment firm because the banking and the investment activities, you can't mix them, but it can be, under one financial institution. So, if you think of like a mini BlackRock of Puerto Rico, that's what, we're looking at. Just many capabilities, many offerings. Like I said earlier, there's going to be like regular bank accounts for deposits, also investment accounts, private offerings, and it's going to be an international private banking service that we're launching. So again, 180 countries, and there's going to be one dashboard for everything for our clients. So we're excited about launching that. It should be next year, Q2. We're looking at making that publicly accessible. But again, there's a lot of regulations around that, how we can market to potential clients, how we can, mix those activities under one roof, under one brand. So it's a lot of work for the legal compliance team that I have, but we also have, good partners there that will be managing the back office, the operations, and then us with, the brands, the marketing, bringing in new clients.
Sure, sure. And what shifts do you anticipate in the industry itself, with everything changing so quickly, even outside of what you guys are doing, all the growth, the AI, the transparency, right? What shifts do you see specifically in the industry moving forward in the short term?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I recently was talking to someone about the change that I'm seeing, and it's insane, how much social media is influencing this area. Like not only with startups getting placing their campaigns or their capital raising campaigns on LinkedIn, but a lot of it's changing, even with the public equity markets, private equity. People are raising their entire rounds just from one LinkedIn post.
Mm.
I mean, millions of dollars. And what we've seen and what we're integrating right now is the concept of storytelling and using media, like very, very high quality, like commercials to advertise for these companies, advertise their rounds, even advertise, their product launches or what they do, anything about their company
Yeah,
using this like very high quality style. It could almost be like a movie, ad, commercial, anything like that. And if the campaign goes viral, meaning there's like hundreds of thousands of impressions, it can attract investors right to the inbox. And I've seen that. Like the VCs will find you if your startup is attractive and if it's visible and if there's a clear way of how the startup will make money. But also not only for startups, but for funds. And I've seen this a lot. Funds are now running advertisements on Google, Facebook. So they're putting money to run an ad that will show up on your screen, your phone, your computer, and then they're able to target the specific investor. They're able to target the location, the interests, and people can raise large rounds. I mean, for funds that are raising 50, 100 million, if they have these advertisements and campaigns going, which the SEC allows,
yeah.
that's game changing. I mean, that's totally different than how people were operating even 10 years ago. I mean, that concept just did not exist and it works. So, that's something that we're looking at right now. And
Okay.
even going back to like 2021 timeframe when I started, investing and in the public markets, there were, traders on Twitter with like 600,000 followers that were actually moving the prices, of each individual stock just based
Yeah.
on posts. And there were algorithms tied to the post. And I mean, it just gets wild how,
GameStop.
yeah, not only GameStop, but there are many, many more that were influenced from these like
Yeah.
online communities. And if you think of, okay, yeah, there's millions of people watching. Let's say there's a million and each person puts in $5. $5 million can go into, a stock or a company, but obviously the ticket sizes are a lot larger, thousands of dollars. So, when you see these large rounds of like 40, $50 million, it's really not impossible if you have many investors investing, just a couple thousand, tens of thousands. And, that's more like a Reg A type of crowdfunding. But the SEC allows Reg A, I think it's you can raise 75 million within 12 months. So it's different than, 506C, which is just accredited. But either
Okay.
way, in the US, they make it really, really easy for emerging fund managers to start, and the storytelling can help a lot.
Yeah, yeah, and that's interesting that you mentioned the storytelling because at the end of the day, people buy from people, right? So
Mhm.
we can do all the robot stuff we want, but if you don't have a story, it really it hinders you, right? So it's so important to have that story, be relatable, that know, like, and trust factor, right?
Yeah.
Kind of behind everything that you're doing. So that's really cool that you pointed it out.
Yes.
So just to end this here, for considering everything you've accomplished and kind of where you're at for other founders who are beginning, who have witnessed their first growth, are looking to scale quickly, what's a piece of advice that you would give to them about the importance of speed and accuracy when they are executing, as well as just another piece of advice on how to scale and grow so quickly?
Yeah, this is a really important question. And I would say that the journey is different for everyone, right? And it's definitely difficult. And starting anything from scratch or being an entrepreneur or being an investor is very difficult. And people don't realize like how many losses can be along the way before they actually start to have their first growth or, have their breakthrough moment. And it could be years before, something really takes off. And there's a lot of work, a lot of sacrifices, a lot of capital that can go into a company or a project before it really takes off. And that is what makes it important to persevere and have resilience during that time frame where you don't see much growth, but you know that eventually, you will hit a certain milestone. So I would say it's just being able to deal with doing hard things, right? Deal with being misunderstood or, having a lack of support from friends and families. There's a lot of strangers that can become, your future investors or partners or, to where you can get your first check from. And I've experienced at 26 a lot of lessons, a lot of life lessons, a lot of lessons about running a company, a lot of losses as an investor too, right? Nobody likes to lose money. And I say it's better to lose my own money than other people's money, especially if you have LPs or external capital. So for myself, I would say just get through the difficult part before you can really see any growth because that really is the hardest. And then as a founder, going through those lessons, you just automatically get experience, your skills are refined, you get smarter of like how do I deal with these difficult situations? And then they become not so difficult anymore. So that's a little vague, but people our age that are, in their 20s or 30s, or even people earlier or younger in their career, they really have the advantage to start now. And I mean, I see it every day. There's people 21 or 20 years old making millions of dollars a year, and they're not they're not joining the corporate world. It's because they're doing something really different and they believe in themselves and they just hit the ground running until they make it, you know. And those are inspiring things to see.
Certainly, yeah, that's awesome advice. Perseverance it seems to be the biggest thing here. Well, thank you for joining us here today. I'm gonna end the recording here, and then we can
Okay,
finish up offline here. Let's see.
perfect.